Rabbanon. So we got up to the Gemara here on Daf Kuf Tes Zayin Amid Aleph. After finishing the Mishnah, and it's about, I guess you'd say, 2/3 of the way down, or a little bit more than half the way down the Amud on Kuf Tes Zayin. Tana Rabbanon, Chacham Beno. He has a son who's a Chacham. Shoalo. His son is intelligent enough. He has the capacity to ask the questions, the Manishtana. Again, we had a whole discussion last week whether or not the child is asking his own questions, which might change from year to year, or there's a standard text in which he will ask the Manishtana, because the Manishtana is really defining the Kedushas Hayom and the special mitzvahs of the night of Pesach. But in any event, the bottom line is that the Chacham is going to ask his questions. V'im Eino Chacham. Now, the implication here in Eino Chacham is that he doesn't have any members of the Seder, in other words, the household or any, nephews or I don't know what, to ask the Manishtana. So now the question is addressed by this Mishnah implicitly, well, maybe we should drop the whole idea of Manishtana. If there's no one there to ask the questions, let's say it's he and his wife. There's no one else at the Seder table. So the Mishnah is Machadish Ishto Sha'alato. That means that the method of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, by definition, requires she'elo tshuva. Optimally, if everything is ideal, there'll be a real question that's being asked. It's not, some sort of text by compulsion that you're reading a question, but there's a fallback position in event that there is no one's there to ask him, or he doesn't have a ben chacham to ask him, then his wife should be asking him the question. V'im lav, let's say he's not married. So he's at a Seder table alone or with other people who are not capable of asking the question. Who shoel li'atzmo? In other words, he's going to answer his own questions. It's a very strange kind of give and take, the thought occurred to me that maybe even in Talmud Torah, when a person learns a Blat Gemara, he should be asking himself questions. Now, he probably knows the answers, if the answer is going to be Avodah Mayinu L'Far Mitzrayim, but perhaps he can go beyond that, meaning, every year he could possibly spend some time researching, either before or even during the Seder itself, to ask questions that either he long forgot the answers or maybe he never even asked those questions. Now, in the note here, he quotes a Shut HaRosh. You have it under Lamed Zayin. Do you see that? Ein mitzvah l'saper b'piv et sipur yitzias Mitzrayim b'leil HaSeder ela im yishal haben. This is a statement, a ruling of the Rosh, which is antithetical to everything that we know from all our discussions about the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Sipur requires Sipur b'peh. And the Rosh is saying that that's not so. If there's a question being asked, then he answers the question. If there's no question being asked, then there's no need for Sipur. Sipur means I tell you. But if you're not there to be told, then there's no Sipur. What's the fallback position in such a case is a structure of Zechira. Well, let me say it this way, a structure of Sipur, but through Zechira. Right? Zechira means you remember. So it's your awareness, your consciousness. And in Sipur, we require a consciousness and awareness of something that goes way beyond Zechira. But whatever it is that's required, it could be mental. It could be a thought process. And basically, we have mitzvos that only require a thought process. There's a havmin in the Gemara that even Kriyat Shema might be enough for machshava, but no, Kriyat Shema has to be recited b'peh. But let's say, for example, mitzvos like Yiras Hashem or Avas Hashem or Emuna, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the belief in one God, or take, for example, Tefillah. On a Doraisa level, Tefillah is called Avodah Shebalev. It does not require Dibur Peh. And the rush in the Tshuva seems to be subsuming Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim as a mitzvah shebelev, which would mean that there are two, like Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim divides into two subcategories. If everything is ideal, there'll be a question and an answer. If not, then it's just b'machshava. And if you accept the Tshuvas HaRosh, then we have an answer to the question of why there's no bracha on the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Every mitzvah requires a birchas ha-mitzvah, asher kitshanu mitzvosav v'tzivanu, and then we name the mitzvah. We don't find such a bracha with regard to the Haggadah, with regard to the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And if the Rosh is right that this is a mitzvah that can be fulfilled b'machshava, like Tefillah Shebalev is believe, so too he can think about whatever thoughts that are required to think about. And you don't make a bracha on Machshava Shebalev. There's no bracha on Yiras Hashem or Avas Hashem. But he writes that nobody knew where the rush was coming from. Achronim iskachu b'bir dvorim shrei beferish shaninu she'afim ein mishi yishalenu tzarchu lishol esatzmu l'saper b'tzias Mitzrayim, and the next word is the key word. That's what we want to underline. B'piv. So, if in the context of the let's say the Lashon HaMikra, it's when the Torah commands us in this mitzvah, perhaps we can wonder and analyze, suspecting that maybe the mitzvah is belev and not bepeh, but the Mishnah says explicitly that who's shoel es atzmo. What does it mean, shoel es atzmo? He's going to ask and he's going to answer. L'chor, that means bepeh. Again, the Rosh is going to say shoel es atzmo b'machshavto. V'chidah mitzadit shel das harosh hadin hashoni kanu sheshol es atzmo mishum chibuv mitzvah. Ach min hadin ein bo afilu mitzvah d'rabbanan. So the Rosh is learning, according to the Chidah, that this whole discussion in the Mishnah about what to do if no one's asking him the questions is all chibuv mitzvah. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by chibuv mitzvah. It literally translates we cherish the mitzvah. It's beloved to us. But here he might be saying it's a hidur mitzvah. It will beautify the mitzvah and give us a higher level of kiyum. Like it's like buying a nice esrog, right? You can buy a basic esrog for 100 shekel. You could spend 1,000 shekel on an esrog. Here also, the Mishnah is telling you that you can be Mekayim the mitzvah without divur peh, and you are mesaper to yourself in your mind, and it's a state of consciousness, or you can fulfill it on a higher level, and that's called chibuv mitzvah, by asking and answering and speaking it out verbally. And the Chidah goes very far here. He says that even the Rabbanon, according to the Rosh, never required dibur peh. It was never a requirement. You want to enhance the mitzvah, you want to beautify it, great, go ahead and speak it out. And now he quotes Rav Yerucham Fischel. His last name was Perlau, who writes a super commentary on the Rasag, Rav Saadia Gaon, Shaladas HaRosh, Kishabino Sholo, Chayv min HaTorah b'Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim, Kshe'ein b'no Sholo chiyuvo rak min Rabbanon, v'chein ha'chiyuv l'lamed es b'no lishol, eino ela min Rabbanon. So there are a number of chidushim here in this Rav Perla. Let me start from the back, from the bottom, and go up. Shalom Keseda. The last chiddush here is that even if his son asks the question and he responds to his son's question, that's only d'Rabbanan. Because according to the Rosh, on a deraisa level, the whole mitzvah is in your mind. It's in a state of awareness of consciousness. Therefore, this whole effort to get a question and answer is all d'Rabbanan. However, that's not really what he's saying. It can't be what he's saying for two reasons. First of all, because the Torah says "V'yigadet lebincha," so you can't tell me that answering your son's questions is d'Rabbanan. It's explicit in the Torah. And secondly, you look backwards at the beginning of this paragraph. He says, "Kishabino sholo chayv min haTorah b'sipur yitzis Mitzrayim." So clearly, Rav Perla is not saying that the entire enterprise of the son asking questions, the manishtana, and you as a father answering the question, that's all d'Rabbanan. That can't be. That's certainly min haTorah. However, what if he doesn't have a son to ask him the questions? And here's the bomb. Here's the chiddush of the Rosh. If he doesn't have anyone to ask the questions, the entire mitzvah goes down the tubes, and the Rabbanan will create a new mitzvah of sipur b'peh, even in the absence of anyone asking him questions. And that's what the Mishnah means by shoel es atzmo. Ein lo ben lishol hu shoel es atzmo. That's a Rabbanan. And again, if you ask me why the Rabbanan in this mahalach, why did they make such a takana? Why did they institute such a mitzvah? Well, the Torah says that it's only if his son asks him a question, then v'yigadet lebincha. But there's no mitzvah in the absence of anyone asking him the questions. And now we find the Rabbanan, there's going to be like a quasi question and answer kind of thing, but it's got to be dibur b'peh. And one way of explaining it would just be saying that, we want to get him into the right mode so that if there will be someone to ask him, he'll understand that now there's a mitzvah to respond. So let's get him into the mode of she'elo tshuva, even on a d'Rabbanan level, when there's no one to ask him. Alternatively, the Rabbanan took a mitzvah which you can be makayim b'machshava, and they converted it into a mitzvah b'peh. Not because they were afraid, what happens in another scenario next year or this and that, somebody will ask him a question. No, that's the way the Rabbanan wanted to formulate the mitzvah. I'll give you an example. In Ner Chanukah, the mitzvah is Ner Ishu Beisel, one Ner for the entire mishpacha. And not only that, the rest of the mishpacha will not actively light the candles. They are in fulfillment of their obligation vicariously through the lighting of the Balabayas, who lit a candle, and it's Ner Ishu Beisel. But nevertheless, everyone will light their own candle on a different level, not because of the initial takana d'Rabbanan, but for a later kind of an obligation to light your own candle. So you see that the Rabbanan sometimes want to change the mitzvah in order to upgrade it, in order to make it more powerful. So they created a kiyum mitzvah midrabanan called sipur b'peh, which is unconditional as far as a question or an answer is. It's just sipur b'peh. That's what the Rabbanan want. So ad kan tshuvas harosh. That's what we have here in the tshuvas harosh. Now, he quotes Reb Chaim Brisker. There are three fundamental distinctions between sipur and zechira. The first one is that sipur has to be b'derech she'ela u'tshuva. Whereas zechira does not require any question. You know, when I recite Kriyat Shema, let's say on a daily basis, day and night, and I say at the end of the third parsha, Ani Hashem Elokecha asher hotzitichem me'eretz Mitzrayim li'oschem Elokim, I am fulfilling the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. I don't have to ask any questions. But here in Sipur on the night of the 15th, we require questions. Number two, L'saper kol hishtalshalus ha'maisa. We're not going to just simply fulfill our mitzvah by saying, God, you took us out of Mitzrayim. That's not enough. We have to go through the entire development, starting with, the Shivim Nefesh Yodu Avosayim Mitzrayim, and then the Shibud, and the Kol HaBena Yotlod, and then the Makkahs, and everything. All that, which culminates in the Geula, in the redemption, in Yitzias Mitzrayim, all that has to be included in the mitzvah of Sipur. And that's called Hishtalshalus HaMaisa. Finally, the third is that the mitzvah of Sipur also involves and requires Rabbi Gamliel's Matzazu and Morzeh and Kol Shalom HaShlosha Dvar Me'elu. He's got to explain the mitzvahs. He calls it the tam of the mitzvahs, the reason for the mitzvahs. Now, I have here this Haggadah, right? I don't know if you can see it. It's called Siach HaGrid. And he likewise addresses this question about the difference between Sipur and Zechira. Let me just see if I can find it. Sorry. So he adds three other points here. I'm not exactly finding it right now inside, so I'll just say it over to you by memory. First of all, he says that the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim is not a separate mitzvah. It's not even counted in Taryag. The Rambam omits it completely. but rather it's part of a greater mitzvah of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, where Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim is a mitzvah unto itself. Then he says that the mitzvah of Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim is much broader than Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim, in that it requires limud halachos. It's not just enough to be mesaper the ma'aser. And then he says that Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim requires halel, and that's why we incorporate halel into the fabric of Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim Na'Goda, but Zechira does not require halel. So again, I don't know why I'm not finding it here for this moment, but it's here. I'll just take one more minute to see if I have it. All right, I don't want to waste our time right now, but that's how I remember. It's also in a footnote in Shirim L'Zecher Abba Mori, which I could take out too. But oh, here it is on page Lamed Zayin. I thought it was at the beginning, but it's much further in. He says that in the name of Reb Chaim, that Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim he lomar b'ktsara sheyatzanu miMitzrayim. It's like a Zechira Koldahu, just mention that God took us out of Mitzrayim. The ilu mitzvah Sipri Tzisrayim l'saper ba'arucha at great length as kol nisim she'iru lavoseinu b'Mitzrayim. Secondly, mitzvah Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim he beino levein atzmo. The ilu b'mitzvah Sipri Yitzis Mitzrayim mitzvasi l'saper libno ulachir midin v'igada to lebincha. And Gimel, mitzvah Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim mitzvasi l'kabel olav malchus shamayim. The ilu mitzvah Sipri Yitzis Mitzrayim mitzvah b'fnei atzma. It's an independent mitzvah, independent of Kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. Then he adds the following: V'nira lahosif bozeh. So this is Rav Soloveitchik adding to his grandfather Reb Chaim. The mitzvah Sipri Yitzis Mitzrayim nichlal gam Ditzrichim lahalel ulahodos lakodesh baruch hu lachein anu korim hahalel b'leil haseder. And he also quotes the Ran, who says that we have to be careful to finish the matzah before chatzos, because of Rabbi Elazar ben Azari's opinion that Eina Pesach Nechal El Ad Chatzos, and therefore Tzarech Likros Ahalel Kodem Chatzos. So he doesn't mention here, but elsewhere he mentions the fact that Sipri Yitzis Mitzrayim requires also learning the halachas. Okay, so that's what we have here. Afilu, the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, Afilu shnei talmidei chachamim sheyodim behilchas haPesach, shoalim ze lo ze ma nishtana laila ze mikol lilos. So once again, as I've harped on this over and over again, you probably heard it so much you're sick of it already. But I think this indicates that Manishtana is not a bunch of questions. It just doesn't make any sense here that the Manishtana should be asked by Talmidei Chachamim. It's just a rote. It's like you give me a siddur and I read the tefillos in the siddur. But the answer is that the Torah requires us to describe the nature of the day. And that's Manishtana. So we have to announce that we have special mitzvahs, we have matzah, we have morah, we have korban Pesach when the Pesach was, and we have Sipri Tis Mitzrayim, which were fulfilled with Heseva, and maybe with Matbilin. Okay. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, Maskif lo Rava, Otu kol Yoma lo Sagi de lo Mitbala Chado Zimna. You can, on any day of the year, you could decide at your Su'uda to be Tovel more than once. Well, why does it say Shekole lo Sono Matbilin Pamachas? What does that mean, Pamachas? Well, does the halacha restrict us to one tibul? Elom Rav Alchi Ktani shebechol elos eno chayavim letabel afilu pamachas. So Rava is adding a whole piece into the Mishnah. Now, we don't have this piece, Kol Leilos Einanu Chayavim. We have Einanu Matbilin. Okay, that's not such a terrible question because Ein Anu Matbilin, according to Rava, is not describing the reality, it's describing the halachic status. Ein Anu Matbilin, we're not chayav in Tibul. Maskif lo Rav Safra, Chiyuva L'Dardaki. Right, we said over and over again that Tibul is a shinui, a change that's meant to arouse the curiosity of the child. Is that called a chiyuv? Is it really a chiyuv to do matbilin? So it sounds like, at the face of it, there's a machlokas here between Rava and Rav Safra about Shnei Tibulim. And Rav Safra's position is a little bit radical. At least it's, in my mind, it's not something that we're familiar with. That there's no chiyuv of Tibul. Tibul is a method of just arousing the child's curiosity. You want to stand on your head, or come out in a clown suit, I don't know, be very creative and get the children to ask what's going on. Well, why is this night different? So what does it mean that according to Rav Safra, they never actually formally constructed a legal requirement of tibul? And part of the reason this is so foreign to me is because, every Seder night, we always talk about tibulim and we try to explain. And we had such a long discussion in the case where he doesn't have any yerek for the first tibul, he only has chazeres. All these discussions revolve around tibul. One tibul before the Suda, another tibul in the Suda. We had long discussions here about tibulim. Is Rav Safra not willing to accept that at least the Chachamim, the Rabbanan, obligated ourselves in two tibulim? I'm looking here the Rashbam, which you'll see on the fourth line down from the wide lines. It's interesting. In the footnote number Lamed Ches, quoting the Maril, he seems to be empathetic here, empathizing with our question. Where is Rav Safra? He denies the whole institution of Shnei Tibulim. Of course, we're obligated in Shnei Tibulim. No one could get away with that. But he has here in the name of the Maril that it depends who's reciting the Manishtana. If someone of bar mitzvah age is reciting the Manishtana, then on this night we're chayav in Shnei Tibulim. And Rav is 100% right. But who's asking the Manishtana? The children are asking the Manishtana. And children include even those who are not bar mitzvah. And those who are not bar mitzvah cannot recite Halayla Zeh Anu Chayovim B'Shnei Tibulim because they're not chayav in any tibul. But I don't get it because what about matzah, for example, right? It says Manishtana halayla zeh shebechol eilos anu ochlim chavetz umatzah halayla zeh kulo matzah, which means that he's obligated to the mitzvah of matzah. The one you asked me, but the question is being asked by a katan. He's not chayiv in any mitzvahs. He's a katan. What am I missing here? If you guys can help me, I would be appreciative. Anybody? You're leaving me all alone over here. It's not nice. Not fair. Again, let me just make sure we're all on the same page. He's quoting here in footnote Lamed Ches and Maril. And the Maril distinguishes between two different groups or age brackets of people who are asking the Manishtan. Rav Safra has no problem with Gedolim. A Gadol could say that on this night we're chayiv in two tibulim. Why? But a Katan can't use that phrase, on this night we're chayiv in two tibulim, because a Katan is not chayiv in mitzvahs. And that's Rav Safra's position. So I asked you the question, what about matzah? I mean, nobody objected to the question. Rav Safra didn't object to the question about matzah. How is a katan going to ask a question about the eating of matzah? He's not obligated to eat matzah. Unless maybe the question is about the Isur Chametz. You know, we're not asking about the obligation to eat matzah. We're asking why did we get rid of our chametz and all we have is matzah? Why did the Torah say we don't eat chametz? Maybe that's his question. All right, I'm not evoking any response here. I'm going to blame it on Zoom. Blame all my troubles on Zoom. Elom Rav Safra Hachi Ketoni. Ein onu matbilum afilu pam achas. Now you have to leave out the word chiyuv here because we're talking about dardiki. Dardiki can't mention the word chiyuv; they're not chayah. So ein onu matbilum. You know, this is the way we eat our meal. You know, we don't do tibul. Again, if somebody wants to do tibul, avala bracha bakasha. But alayla zeh shtei pamim. The minig is, so to speak, that we do two dippings. And the question is why? That's a valid question. And this is what he says also in the Lavush here, about 4 lines up before the end of the page, at the end of footnote Lamites. Shebechol eilos einonu noagim lahatbil afilu pam achas, u'b'layla zeh noagim lahatbil shtei pamim. Okay. Then the Mishnah says, Maskil b'gnus u'misayim b'shvat. My b'gnus. Oh, so here we have Machlok Shin Rav and Shmuel. Rav, Omar, Mitchila Ovdei Avodas Galilim Hayu Avosein. So he's quoting here the Brisker Rav is bothered. What's the connection here between Avodah Zarah and Yetzias Mitzrayim? Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is about freedom from slavery. And now we're going back to talk about our forefathers, our ancestors who worshipped Avodah Zarah. It doesn't seem to be relevant to Sipur. I mean, Shmuel is going to say that Avodah Mayinu L'Far Mitzrayim. That's absolutely relevant to the story of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. But why are we talking about Avodah Zarah? So the Brisker Rav says the following, that the ultimate goal or purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim is Lios Lachem Elokim, is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. And the opposite of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim is Avodah Zarah. So we go from one state of worshiping and being servants to Avodah Zarah to the stage of being servants and worshiping the Almighty. That's exactly what Yetzias Mitzrayim is all about. So it's very relevant to speak Maskal B'Gnus with Avodah Zarah, because that's the antithesis, the opposite of Geulas Mitzrayim, insofar as Geulas Mitzrayim is for the purpose of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. And that's in fact what we say in Kriyat Shema. Anochi Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher tzilsicha mi'eretz Mitzrayim liyos lachem Elokim. I took you out of Mitzrayim so that you would accept me as your sovereign God. Now, what's important here is to add a few words in the answer to this question. In other words, if as part of the structure of Sipur Yisrael we need Maskal B'Gnus, and the Gnus is going to be the exact opposite of Messiah B'Shvach. So the Messiah B'Shvach is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, and the opposite of that is Avodah Zarah. Then one could raise the following question here. If we're going to answer, if the opposite of Maskal B'Gnus is going to be the Achshav, what's the language? It's going to be Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham biyad chazaka ubizra netuya. So it's all about the servitude, the slavery, and the freedom thereof. So where's the Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim here? If Maskal B'Gnus, according to Rav, is Avodah Zarah, and Messiah B'Shvach, the way the Brisker Rav understood it, is that now we have one God and we serve and we're subservient to one God. I don't see it. All I see here in this entire paragraph called Avodah Hayinu is a discussion about God taking us out of slavery. But for this, I think we have to go beyond that in the Haggadah to this paragraph, which says the following. Mitchila ovdei avodah zara hayu avosaynu v'achshav kirvanu hamokom lavodasa. That's 4 words. The Masechet V'Shvach has 4 words to it. It's not Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham. Ve'ilu lo hotzi harayonu mishubadim ayinu lefaro, etc., etc. No, the key words here of Masechet V'Shvach are v'achshav kervanu hamokum lavodasa. That now, God, you've taken us closer to you, and you are our sovereign God, and we serve you. So it's the service of Hashem that is the essence of the answer that we're giving here to Masechet V'Shvach. That the purpose of God taking us out of Mitzrayim is Achshav Kirvanu Hamokom Lavodasa. And that's going to be the Masechet V'Shvach. And that represents, according to Rav, the essence of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, meaning the essence of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Amalei Rav Nachman L'Daru Avdei. Let's wait a second. I didn't read Shmuel, sorry. Shmuel Amar Avodim Ayinu, and then Masechet V'Shvach is Hotzionu Hashem Mitzrayim. He has a footnote here, number Mem Aleph. V'hainu shal yidei shemefarsem ha'avdus yochel l'shabech al ha'shichur. So we can praise Hashem and thank Hashem for freeing us from avdus if we really understand Maskal B'Gnus that we were avodim. And then he quotes the Marsha, she'inyonenu hu shebiyom simchas libo shel adam yizkar tchila shifluso v'gnuso. That on the very day of his joy, he should recall his low state. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Let's make a note that we're halfway here in footnote number Mem Aleph, and the Mitzvah Hashem will finish that up tomorrow. Okay then? Thank you very much.